Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the ReQuest. It's me, Captain Logan, and joining me, as always, is my wonderful co-host and the guy that reads closer than me so that he could do all of the synopsis. It's Austin the Day Ghost.
How's it going? I just noticed your Skype window's a little bit in my box. I don't know if you can see that. But I just looked down and I could see Lord Zed, and I was like, wait a minute, I should probably tell you that.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. No, now it's moving. Why does it do that in OBS sometimes? You'll click on it, and I'm not dragging it, but it thinks I am. Anyway, no, you're right. I mean, I could crop it, but you're nicely centralized and.
Oh, if I can move if you'd like, but.
No, that's okay. We'll just leave
it.
We'll just leave it. Anyway, everybody, thanks a lot.
I got the devil on my shoulder.
Thanks a bunch for being here, guys. Today's request comes from Gooster123 on Patreon, and he asked us to read a big whopper. This is Earth X, which was conceptualized and kind of outlined by Alex Ross and came out in 1999. Austin, I was kind of tangentially or peripherally aware of this because I had a friend that I worked with at a movie theater senior year of high school that was obsessed with this series, or I should say was obsessed with Universe X. And he let me borrow Universe X, which I still have in my possession because I forgot to ever give it back to him. So this was 20 years ago. I still have, I know, I'm horrible. I still have it.
Yeah, but only worse than Satan.
I'm only slightly worse than the Watcher in this book.
Yeah, exactly. Damn.
Yeah, I'm the klepto watcher. I just I take people's stuff and I look at it and then I conveniently forget to ever give it back. Not on purpose.
I just want to hang up right now.
I worked with that guy for a semester, and then I never saw him again, and then I felt really bad because I thought I'd see him, and then I didn't, and then I didn't give him his book back. Anyway, what's really funny is I never even finished it because I had no clue what the heck I was looking at. It was a sequel to another thing, which is this, and he didn't tell me that when he let me borrow it.
I wonder if he even knew. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just read it and was like, this is, mind-boggling. I love it.
Yeah, retroactively, that's kind of the sense I get. Mm-hmm. And there's a novelty just, especially right then, when you're just getting the start of the Ultimate Universe and stuff like that. There's much more of a novelty for big sprawling alternate universe continuities in comics at this point. Mm-hmm. Which was starting to really get popular in the mid-90s, I would say, because obviously you already had Elseworld stuff, you already had What If, but the idea of a universe that, this, maybe starts at a particular point in the universe and then continues forward and diverges after that, or Ultimate starts from a totally different place in the first place, and then there are multiple books in the continuity, we have sequels, we have spin-offs. That was fairly new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is more of a DC thing. In fact, when you initially said we're doing Earth X, I thought it was DC. And it wasn't until I finally looked at it that I realized what it was.
It's funny you say that because the CW shows, the Arrowverse, they had a crossover that was Crisis on Earth X. I don't know if you know that, but they did a sort of Crisis before they did Crisis on Infinite Earths, just like the comics do.
I didn't realize it was Earth X.
It was Earth X, yeah, where they had an evil Supergirl. That was actually one of the better crossovers they did, and I had forgot about that until I was looking up information for this, and one of the first things that came up in Google was that, and I was like, oh, that's right. That's also sort of a DC thing. But I don't know if Earth X was comic book or if they made that. I think that is comic book.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's also weird for this being a Marvel thing that it's, especially in this time, it's Earth X and is nothing to do with the X-Men, really.
It has as much to do with the X-Men as it does all the other major mythology, because, this has something to do with everything in Marvel. Kind of the log line of this is, let's connect it all up in its way more than anything ever has done now. We're going to give big answers to questions that, I don't know, maybe you've never asked, maybe you have, but then stuff that's not even ultimately going to be in continuity, where it's like we've had these big mysteries all along, and this book is finally going to answer them, but only for its own universe. It's super clever in the way it deals with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I look at this as kind of like, you know, the Marvel, we've talked about these before, but the Marvel, like, The End books, you had, like, Fantastic Four, The End, and all of those. This is Marvel, The End, except it actually sets up for a sequel at the end. It isn't the end, but until I get to the end of it, it really reads like that. And I don't know, I don't want to get too ahead of myself yet, but, you know, it almost feels like it should be, like, a final chapter of something. Like it kind of reads like Marvel was always supposed to be more novel-esque, like it would have an actual endpoint at some point. And there's these, like I said, big revelations that feel like, you know, penultimate and then final chapter stuff. And then it's sort of like Dark Knight Returns, where it's like, well, it's not like we kill off the major characters at the end or anything. Like it could keep going. You could have a sequel if you really wanted to. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they did.
Yeah. Yeah, where X becomes the universe, apparently.
I mean, that's where the treasure is. You dig under the earth.
I mean, kind of.
That's true. No, we'll get there. But I feel like the story that these guys are telling, this is, by the way, written by Jim Krueger. And like I said, you have to give Alex Ross credit because it starts from an idea he had that he, I think, kind of helps to flesh out with this. But Krueger really, like from his initial idea, from his initial creation, you know, really puts pen to paper and makes this whole thing happen. And then the art is by John Paul Leon, and luckily we don't have an artist change in this book. It's the same all the way through, which I was a little bit surprised by.
Yeah, no kidding.
Given
I was also surprised
the length of it,
wasn't Alex Ross art.
Yeah, or even like kind of aping Alex Ross art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that it's not in any way, but it comes from at least notes that he made.
Yeah, so I didn't know this, but the story behind this is Alex Ross was commissioned by Wizard Magazine. Did you read about this?
No.
To conceptualize a dystopian Marvel universe. What would your characters look like in a future where everybody gets superpowers? And it's like, we'll make this comparison a lot later, so we might as well bring it up now, but like it starts off feeling very much like the Marvel version of
Kingdom Come.
Kingdom Come, yeah, which is also Alex Ross, except he drew that book, and I think he co-wrote it. I can't remember.
I think he just drew it. I think that's all Wade.
It's been a long time since I've read that. Well, actually, it hasn't been that long, but it feels like a while since I reviewed it, because I've reviewed a lot of things since then. But Kareem and I did that book. I want to say that was the first thing Kareem and I did together, so probably like
I think so.
Probably 3 years ago now.
Yeah, I think that was the first thing you guys did together.
I wish in hindsight I had thought to ask him to be here for this, because he would have been great to talk about this with us, and I'd be surprised if he hadn't read it or at least know something about it. But in my defense, I didn't know it was going to be as related to Kingdom Come as it is. Mm-hmm. This comes out just 3 years after that. Pardon me, after that. And anyway, that issue of Wizard Magazine was so popular, it sold out insanely fast. And then Marvel reprinted the article from that book with all of his art, or from that issue, excuse me, as its own, like, one-shot thing. And that sold gangbusters. And so Marvel commissioned him then to do this book. And
interesting.
He must have been busy enough with other stuff that he didn't feel like he could just straight up write the whole thing himself. Or maybe he didn't feel up to that task, because, of course, he's an artist before he's a writer. And I mean,
that makes me wonder,
he does write some, but I'm glad he found the guy he did, because it's hard to say if it would be better or worse if Ross had just straight up done it himself. But I mean, this guy's solid.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes me wonder though, like, is there stuff in this where it's just like, here is a design, and like, for example, like with how I have the screen, I can see Daredevil right here on the cover, and like, is there a possibility that, like, he just went, okay, this is what a dystopian Daredevil looks like, and then this writer comes in and goes, okay, like, this is my take. Like, it could have been something completely different, maybe, if Alex Ross wrote it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he just keeps getting credit for outline, and I don't know exactly what that means. Mm-hmm. I'm going to assume pretty Marvel method, though. You know?
Yeah, because it could be as far as like here's like a breakdown of what the main story is, or it could have just been here are designs.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Austin, would you give us a real brief? I mean, this is complicated. Give us the initial setup for this, and then
universe.
We'll kind of break it down. So this is, what I want to do with this review is go maybe a little bit broader and more kind of brushstrokes than we usually do. I keep calling this a 12-issue maxi series. It's actually 14, and it's got a prologue and an epilogue. Well, I can't even say epilogue. That's just the last issue. But like, it's got a 0 issue that is like 50 pages, and then its last issue is also 40 or 50 pages.
Yeah, it's more like a 16-issue miniseries. Like when you break it all down.
Yeah, lengthwise, yeah. Mm-hmm. Page count wise, yeah. It's long, and we'll talk about that because one of my only gripes with this book is the length.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, set us up a little bit, Austin, and my apologies, but while you're doing that, I'm gonna have to fix something because my chair has gotten all messed up, and I cannot sit like this the rest of the show. So
just put a coaster under the one wheel, you'll be good.
So I'm just gonna do this, and then you talk for a minute here. Here, I'll put a double page spread up here.
Just say with how far zoomed in I am, all I can see is the watcher's face. Okay, perfect. Let's do this.
No, that's great. That's perfect. Anyway, yeah, go ahead and give us a synopsis long enough for me to fix my chair.
Okay. The Watcher is blind. So the Watcher, he can't see anything anymore, so he gets Machine Man in, and they're gonna watch the Marvel Universe, which is now like 20 years ahead of, I'm guessing probably around where the main books would have been at the time.
It's actually supposed to be 10.
Is it supposed to be 10? They kept saying 20 years.
Well, we're told it's 10 years after the end of the, air quotes, heroic age. So maybe there's 10 more years of that we don't see, I guess.
Possibly. They say that the Watcher's been blind for 20 years, so I assumed it was just, okay, wherever we are now, this is 20 years ahead of that.
I missed that, if he was supposed to be blind that long.
Yeah, they mentioned it a few times, I think.
But that makes sense because some history would definitely have to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there would be history between where we would be technically in continuity.
Well, I was going to say in between that and like all the drama with the Fantastic Four and the Inhumans and yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so basically like all of the heroes are broken up. There's for some mysterious reason, every single person on Earth now has powers. They're all mutated. And
when he says for some reason, we will get answers to all of this.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Fantastic blames himself on this thing that he did. I'm trying to remember. It has something to do with vibranium. I think he's trying to like power the planet with vibranium, I think. And he believes that's the reason why this is happening. Meanwhile, the Inhumans are coming back.
It's an experiment that fails to get renewable energy. And he thinks that has turned everyone into mutants. But it's actually something else. And the whole world blames him for it, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Let me see. I'm like trying to break down every character in my head. There's so many. The X-Men are gone. It's just Scott, Wolverine, and Jean are the last X-Men characters left. The rest of them all died. Sue and Johnny with the Fantastic Four are dead. Reed is now in like disguised as Doctor Doom and living in Latveria. Spider-Man is retired and his daughter is Venom. And Mary Jane is dead because everyone's dead.
A lot of people are dead, yeah.
Yeah. All the Avengers
Can
are
I
dead.
Stop you for 1 second just to ask you a question?
Yeah.
I don't fully get the reason that Richards felt the need to put on the Doctor Doom costume.
I'm trying to remember what it was. Isn't it just
besides just some sort of like poetic justice thing? Like losing Doom,
like going into exile, basically.
Yeah, but I'm not sure why he has to like be Doom.
That I'm not sure, but
doing that, it didn't feel like we really talked about it much.
But I also think that makes sense for like a place for him to go into exile too. and that seems to be like the only way he's able to get in is because he just shows up and everybody thinks he's Doom, and like the Doombots don't immediately try to kill him because they think he's Doom.
It also conveniently gives him a lot of resources to work with and a quiet place to work.
Yeah, exactly. A place where he can never sleep.
I have to say, by the way, that I'm likely to miss details here and there and make mistakes because this is dense and there's a lot of material.
Yeah, there's like 400 pages, and I read
400 pages. I
I
did not have time to read it again, and I read probably 7. I read about half of this today, I think.
When I almost lost it today because I had 2 issues left, and the last one was double-sized. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to read it at work. And then like I had a thing that happened at work, and I was like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to have like any time to read.
Oh no!
And then I was able to just like work through everything I had. I had like the last like 3 hours, and I was able to get it done. But that's like just made it.
That's lucky. Yeah, because you cannot save this to right before the show.
Yeah, no, there was no way I could manage like the hour between finishing work and starting. But anyways,
yeah.
Where was I? Thor is a woman now. Hulk is Bruce Banner is a little boy, and Hulk himself, like Bruce Banner is a kid that rides Hulk.
Yeah,
and he can like only see through Hulk's eyes, and Hulk is a giant monkey in a diaper, which is just delightful.
So at first I thought that he was just drawn weird in like back off shots. I was like, oh, he kind of looks like a kid, but he can't be because we're in the future. And then we do close up shots on him and he's a kid, and I'm like, I don't really understand how that happened. And there's sort of a throwaway explanation for just every time the Hulk has been different is because of his like constant evolution with the mutation because of the gamma radiation. And I guess that's supposed to explain it, but I don't... Was there an explanation for why he seems to have de-aged?
Not that I remember.
Okay, I did not see that anywhere.
I think it's just like part of his mutation is just they mutate, and because there's like the whole thing with like Hulk and like the kid personality, or like the trauma Banner had as a kid. I think maybe there's something with that.
Okay, they don't really get into that.
Yeah, they like mention it a little bit, but like not so much in why he's a kid. Like they just like
we should mention every major character or segment of the Marvel Universe gets a very lengthy, sometimes tedious, sometimes overwritten history. That's
the structure of every issue. Is like it all starts with the history and
of every issue is you get like 2 full-page spreads at the beginning of an issue that break down a character or a team's like history, and then you catch up to more or less the last place you would have seen them. So like it's seamless, but you'll get to a place where it's like, oh, I don't know about this history yet because it's made up for this, because now we get kind of the tragic backstory of whatever has happened to them in this pseudo dystopian future. Like it's as dystopian or not as something like Kingdom Come, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I think even less so than that. It's less cynical in general than that book, and I think it's also about different things, which is why I kind of stopped comparing it to that at some point. I don't know if you had that, but at some point, like, I started going like, oh, this is kind of derivative, and it's kind of just Alex Ross doing the same thing again, premise-wise anyway, and then it kind of turns into, oh, it's not even really like a commentary on like comics and editorial in the way that book was. Like you could maybe read a little bit in that if you want to, but it's different. Like it's not doing the same things with that at all.
Mm-hmm. So I wasn't really comparing it to that from the beginning. Obviously I was like, well, there is similarities, but I don't like Kingdom Come, so I wasn't really thinking about it while reading it.
Well, and I couldn't help that just because, and I do like Kingdom Come, but I will say, I mean, they're very different, so they're like oddly, it's not even really fair to compare them, which I really
they have like a similar starting place.
Appreciate it. Yeah, the premise is it's the future and everybody's got powers now, and it makes it difficult for the older heroes to feel relevant anymore. Oddly, even though I think the book is less cynical from the beginning, all of its heroes seem a little bit more like depressed and kind of put out to pasture in this than they do in Kingdom Come. Not everybody, but several of our heroes are a lot more like. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it, like, you know, bordering on frumpy or something, right? Like,
yeah,
you got a lot of, you know, just kind of aging, bloated heroes that are like past their prime and depressed, and we don't do it with everybody, but like we do it with Peter Parker, we do it with Wolverine, like.
Yeah, this is like a book made for me because Wolverine's a fat loser. And he's never redeemed.
No, he's not. And I was kind of surprised by that. I wondered if we were saying something with that, where it's like some of these characters are way too popular and they need to be kind of brought down to earth a little bit.
I wonder that a little bit, especially because it has so much love for like the classic characters.
Yeah.
And then Wolverine, while not like 90s, like in that period, is like more like, you know, like a secondary thing. Because you even have that a little bit with Black Panther, who's a 70s character. And
he's thrown under the bus a little bit, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, to a degree, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess it depends on how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the nice thing is there's a good kind of ethical conundrum there, where like whether or not he should be getting involved and putting his subjects at risk and stuff. But like we're getting ahead of ourselves because we haven't broken down the Inhuman part of it enough, but I don't know. It seems to me like there's a really good argument from Captain America that, well, this affects everybody because we're all human beings and it's your planet too. And it seems like from the beginning, T'Challa is being super stubborn and refusing to really listen to how this impacts everybody. And by the end, he's in exactly the same place. And I'm like, you got plenty of evidence that what's happening affects everybody, and that we're all like very much on the same page as to like why we're here. Because in its way, I'll backtrack a second and say when you finally get the big revelation as to why we're all here, because it's trying to answer the big questions about the Marvel universe and also just like humanity and the point of people and why we were put on this earth. In its way, it's almost like creating like making a creation myth, even though. And adding to some of what was already there in Marvel for a creation myth, and dealing with gods and human beings and everything in between, and how all of that interrelates. And it's really creative and intelligent about connecting up all of these things that have always been kind of there together in continuity but disparate. So like, here's how the Inhumans connect to the Eternals, connect to mutants, connect to human beings, connect to Asgardians, and it's amazing how it all works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
That was rambly, but I had to get us there somehow.
No, it's okay. Okay, so of the Avengers, it's just Captain America left, who's stuck on this war with Hydra.
I've been here forever, so I just have to tack on real quick that among all the other crazy and cool things we throw into this, we have a version of Peter Parker's daughter that's May Parker, and they're clearly thinking about Mayday, but they're not doing Mayday. Mm-hmm. And she is, because of course that predates this by a few years, and she is merged with Venom and has a super cool costume.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love her. Yes, she's wonderful.
So Captain America is stuck in like an endless war with Hydra and a new Red Skull who's basically Purple Man. Like, he has those powers, but he's Red Skull.
Well, they're lucky there aren't a bunch of people running around with exactly that power.
Yeah, no, they are. And you can see on the art here, Red Skull's symbol is the Punisher logo painted red.
Is there some reason for that, or is it just we gotta tack?
That's part of.
We gotta tack that in there because we're not gonna actually do anything with Frank Castle. Like, he's one of the only characters we don't deal with.
See, I think that's going into what I was saying with like, this is a lot more love for the classic stuff, where like that's kind of like seen as like an edgy. Again, that's like a '70s character, but like he was really big in the 90s, like Wolverine. So I wonder if that, like Wolverine and Punisher, like the two big things where we're like the writers going like, yeah, this thing kind of sucks.
Yeah, because with the way they handle the cosmic stuff too, it's the really classic stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about Silver Surfer and Galactus and
yeah, exactly.
And Eternals is a real
which is
early thing, and the Celestials, and
which is a bit later, but like that's still Jack Kirby. So it's different.
Well, we do a lot of what we're pulling from this goes up to like mid 70s.
Well, I think isn't Eternals 80s? I think.
Maybe so, but to be fair,
just because it's after New Gods.
But that's more setup-y than it is like dealing that much with the present day stuff. But it's certainly a big part of the foundation of this.
That is true, but like that's where a lot of the Celestial stuff comes from.
Okay,
which is a big part of this book.
I've not ever read Eternal stuff, so I wasn't sure if the Celestials were introduced there.
I'm not sure if they show up anywhere else, but like that is like the big thing is that it's like the Celestials.
All I really know now that you and I have talked about it off camera is the fascinating way that this informs the Eternals movie. And let me just say, I don't hear this come up very much anymore, and it ought to, because it's weird. Like I don't want to say that this is one of the most influential things there is around, but it has influenced stuff that I didn't realize that it had. And
absolutely.
And real quick, I'll just say, like, my experience with this was a roller coaster, because the first 6 issues I thought were an absolute slog, and like I didn't dislike it. I was just kind of bored by the decompression of it, and I thought it was really overwritten. And by the time I got to like issue 9 or so, I was in a this is required reading kind of place.
Yeah, and I have that, but like not to the same degree. Like I'm really liking it until maybe like issue 2, and then it starts to lose me until maybe like 6 or 7, and then it like wins me back on. And like in that period, I'm like, this is slow. This is overridden. But
and does it hold you to the end? Or
100%.
Do you have issues by the end? Because I think the ending is spectacular.
Yeah, no, once it hooks me back in, and I think what helps is that it never really loses me fully. It's just, I'm like, okay, I really like this scene, I really like this scene, but then there's stuff like in the middle that I'm not really liking, and it's going too slow.
Yeah, I was having execution issues with it initially, and I'm sure a second read I'll appreciate it a great deal more even from the beginning, because I'll see all the things that were being set up. This is a really tightly woven story, man. Like nothing is there for no reason. Like when I say slow, it's wordy, but there are no details that don't reveal anything that shouldn't be there. And when you get to the end and you have a couple of, I don't want to say like false endings, but places where you think it might stop and you're not really expecting it to keep going, especially reading it in digital, you don't see how many pages you have left. You might be like, oh really? Like there's more stuff? How are we going to even add anything else? And then you go, oh yeah, we haven't tied that up yet. And like everything is done with purpose, and it also nothing ever feels tacked on. Like even at the very end with the Marvel thing, I didn't feel like it was, oh yeah, we gotta deal with that. Like it seemed like the natural place to deal with that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's so much time's gone by that like that I've like forgotten that we never paid that off.
Yeah,
and it happens. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's shockingly sophisticated.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so they're trying to figure out why everyone's an Inhuman now, or sorry, why they're all mutated, and then it turns out
that they're all Inhumans, but they didn't know that.
And
which is thematically fascinating because of the like what are humans put here on the planet for question, and the free will versus predestination kinds of questions. Like they kind of draw attention to that name, dealing with the idea of being inhuman, like inhumane. That's great, the way that's handled.
When certain things like that, I think make this book completely timeless, where you can take this out and put it like 10 years ago and you'll be like, oh, it's part of that big Inhuman push. Like there's several things like that I think, like I was having such a hard time nailing down when this came out while reading it. I don't know if you had that.
No, I didn't, because I
looked at the date before.
Well, I looked it up, and I always do that.
Yeah.
With comics especially, but I think it reads maybe even richer after I don't mean, again, this book itself necessarily influencing things, but just a lot of the parts of the Marvel Universe that this is dealing with have now gotten movies and TV shows and things. And I think if you've been paying a lot of attention to superhero media in the last 10 years, you're kind of rewarded for that going back and looking at this. Like, when this came out, there's a lot of people that would have had no idea who the Inhumans were. This is not a great way to be introduced to them. No. It's a lot nicer if you're already familiar with Attilan, and particularly Black Bolt, if nothing else.
No, this is a book that says, okay, if you're going to read this, you have to know the Marvel Universe.
Yep.
Like, the Marvel Universe is a prerequisite to this book.
Absolutely a prerequisite, yeah. And there are, like, little pieces of it that you wouldn't necessarily have to be a huge fan of to appreciate. Like, I think the book does a good job of not getting horribly bogged down with any particular character's histories once we get into the actual narratives of it, the main narrative. I do think that potentially, tell me what you think about this, that potentially the reason that we have such wordy backstories is to try to make the case that you don't have to know too much about any particular part of the Marvel Universe because we're introducing all of it to you. But who the hell's going to be able to keep all that in their head? Like, there's so much of it.
So much, yeah.
So basically, you're going to take me to a museum, and you're going to take me over to the X-Men wing, and then the Spider-Man wing, and then the Hulk wing, and then you're going to take me outside and be like, oh, and by the way, these guys are all out here on the street fighting, the Skull, and you're going to have to, now you're caught up and you can understand what's happening on the sidewalk out here. Like, that's what it reads like.
Yeah, and those are probably the ones you can most get away with not knowing. Like, the big ones you have to know going into this are, of course, Inhumans, Fantastic Four, Avengers.
Silver Surfer.
Silver Surfer.
I mean, that's part of Fantastic Four, but... Like, yeah. you really need to know the basics of Silver Surfer and Galactus, especially. Especially because those are the things that are most monkeyed with. Or some of the things that are most monkeyed with. And the Asgardians as well.
I feel like you could... Like, they have an important role, but I feel like they're secondary enough that you can probably get away with not knowing.
Sorry, that's not what I meant. I mean that the Asgardians are the other part of this that are monkeyed with the most.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
But 100%. You probably could come into this without having read any Simonson or anything. The fact that I have, I feel like I appreciated this their side of this more. Like when they're, particularly with Loki, and you got a moment where somebody's like, well, now that we know what we'll talk about this in a second, but now that we know what the Asgardians are, and like they're not really gods the way we always looked at them, do we even have to call you Balder? Like, you're not even real, that kind of stuff. I wouldn't have appreciated any of that if I hadn't read some Thor.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So real quick, take us through what the Celestials have done and why human beings are becoming Inhumans.
Okay, so the Celestials came to Earth. They implanted Earth with a seed of a Celestial to be born out of the planet, which they do to tons of planets across the universe. Like that's how they reproduce.
Silver Surfer's planet.
Including Silver Surfer's planet, exactly. And with these, they introduce creatures that can defend the planet because that's one of their people. So they created the Deviants. Deviants go off, they're crazy, so they create the Eternals. And then as like a secondary bonus, they pick one species and they implant them with a genetic seed that can mutate them. And they pick humans, of course, which is the reason why you have so many different superhero characters, like the radioactive bug bite from Spider-Man that activates his... certain mutants are born where it's activated at some point.
But everybody's got a seed.
Exactly, but every single person has one of them, so everyone has the possibility of getting superpowers.
Which means if you put the Terrigen Mist in the air, everybody gets superpowers.
It activates everyone's powers.
My question then is that the one big actual retcon in this? Now, obviously, this is its own continuity, but it starts from a place. And the way I always understood Inhumans is if you put a Terrigen Mist into the air, some people have the gene and some people don't. And
that's what it is.
I thought that's what it was. This does retcon that.
No, this feels like...
But isn't it the only thing that is retcon, like straight up retconned?
Yeah, well, it helps that it's a reveal too. This I think only works in an alternate universe thing like this, but it's got that Ultimate Marvel thing where everything in Ultimate is based on the Super Soldier Serum, and here everything is, the Celestial Seed. So like everything is tied together to this one idea.
What I wasn't sure about with that, where I don't know if I love that aspect of it though, is that with Ultimate it's a straight up reimagining. This feels like, again, looking at it from like the kind of novel sort of gateway, where like the Marvel Universe turns into this serialized thing that we have to keep finding ways to keep fresh and put comics out forever. But when it starts, it feels like a thing, particularly with certain characters like Spider-Man, that like maybe would actually have an end point. And what this initially reads like, again, in comparing it to Kingdom Come, that book felt like it was the clear kind of like furthest end of what modern comics are doing to superheroes. So if we stay like as dark and hard-edged, grimdark as we were doing in the early 90s, this is what the future of comics would look like. This feels like the clear furthest end of, like you said earlier, the traditional classic Marvel stuff. If that actually had an ending, these are the big reveals that makes it possible to put a cap off on that universe, and you answer all these big questions, and you have this really cool kind of argument, kind of debate about the like DC-esque icons that our Marvel superheroes are trying to be, and the gray area where like, is there really any such thing as good and evil? Like, Marvel's always been dealing with that kind of thing, and this just feels like the furthest extent of all of that. And so what I don't love about we have to change what the Terrigen Mist is that, but it feels like a good potential foregone conclusion to the classic Marvel universe we already had set up, where you wouldn't actually have to change anything. And it seems like the only thing that we did that with. So, like, I like it as an alternate ending as opposed to an actual reimagining. And it is retroactively a reimagining. Understand the distinction I'm making, where when you get to the end of the book, you have found out, because it's just revelation after revelation after revelation. And it's shocking, all of these big surprises that actually work, that don't feel like cheap plot twists. I mean, there's a period in this book where it seems like every 3 pages there's this massive plot twist. And they're all satisfying, and I buy all of them. But but when you get to the end of it, one of the things that's really cool about it is you find out that a lot of things that you thought you understood about these characters and about the mythology was really not true. But it all tracks back to, for the most part, the beginning of Stan Lee. It's not like we had to reverse engineer anything from the start, or you don't realize that we've done that. And that's what I'm not sure about with retconning the Terrigen Mist. It seems like a one sheet, unless there's something else that I missed on first read.
What I like about just this book in general is it feels like somebody came along and was like, this is just the Jack Kirby universe. And they picked up like little pieces from all of Jack Kirby's career, and they like tied it into a little bow, and they were like, here is this end of this universe where it kind of all culminates. You see how like all of this Kirby stuff is like properly connected, because like there is stuff that isn't Kirby, like you get Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. They're not really big parts of this book. Like, Spider-Man's there because he's the face of the company, but like he doesn't have a big role.
He does thematically.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the not Kirby characters, to your point, to your argument, are used really in thematic ways. And that's another thing that kind of turns the thing on its head, but more an idea thing, and says we've always looked at power and responsibility wrong. that it isn't that it's the power that gives you responsibility, it's responsibility that gives you enough gumption so that you can like get out of bed and really try and make a thing happen, and that gives you power.
Great speech.
It's wonderful. Yeah, everything about that rang true to me. And actually, it doesn't even go against what Stan Lee was saying about power and responsibility. They're both true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's like a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
That feels like something that maybe could have been schmaltzy because he's saying the power and responsibility thing. But it rings really true, like you said. Like it's a great speech. There's just a lot of things like this where they like break a character down to its core, and like we'll have them outwardly breaking down like why their character is cool, or like how they're interesting compared to another character. And I think like all of that stuff works really well in this.
And a lot of fresh perspective, where it's either a thing that maybe you've never thought about it like that. And that's one of the things that makes it timeless, because a lot of this is stuff that I haven't seen anybody do since then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
But like sometimes it's making an old thing fresh again, and sometimes like making you just look at it in a different way. And sometimes it's like actively changing it, but it makes perfect sense with that character. Where if it had been revealed in 616 somewhere, you would have completely bought it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Stuff like I want to give an example of this.
Yeah,
because by the end of this, we're dealing massively with Galactus, who is my favorite villain in the MCU, or in the MCU. And we haven't had that yet in the Marvel universe,
allegedly.
Yeah, we'll see. The closest we've gotten is Dormammu in Doctor Strange, and that was wonderful. And if we never actually got Galactus, at least I got Dormammu. My worry is we're gonna screw up Galactus. And then I guess I got Dormammu before, but I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see just a cloud again, or heaven forbid something as tacky and awful as MODOK. But I digress.
Transformers just rebooted and they already beat them to the punch with Galactus.
Yeah, you said that wasn't terrible.
No, I liked it. I thought it was fine.
But like, how I mean, no spoilers, but how like specifically did they handle Unicron okay?
Yeah, I thought Unicron was pretty cool.
Okay, sweet.
But
it's not like Giant Cloud Galactus. It's better than that.
No. I mean, you see Unicron in his full glory even in the trailer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I'm just saying it's not lame.
Cool. No, I thought it was well. It's definitely like set-up-y for the future, but
Unicron's my favorite thing in Transformers. Yeah. So I need that to be okay.
And his voice is is a pretty good impression of Thorsten Well's voice.
Is it?
Yeah, which I was happy with.
I don't mean to be superficial about this, and we'll get back to this book, but one of the reasons I love Unicron so much is just because I got to hear Leonard Nimoy scream it in the 86 movie, Unicron!
Well, I didn't notice until I watched it a second time that they played his 86 theme, and I was like, oh my god, yes!
Oh, that's awesome!
That's so cool.
Anyway, what point was I making? So, Galactus, we find out, has always been more altruistic than we ever thought he could be.
Yeah, he's ultimately a hero in this.
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, yeah.
So he's going to planets not just... Now, we are told that he still needs the energy that he's getting to sustain himself. That is part of why he does what he does. But the main reason is... is basically population control for the Celestials.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing he mainly has to eat. Like, that's where the energy comes from.
Yes. He has to make sure... But what I'm saying is it's not just his own self-preservation like we always thought it was. He's not just a force of nature. Now, just like with everything else we're told in this book, he does exist for a preordained purpose. But there are, like, decisions he makes in trying to save people that are also there for a preordained purpose. So, he goes to the planets he goes to because somehow or rather he knows that that's where the Celestials are. Now, I kind of needed, and maybe it's somewhere and I missed it, but on first read I didn't notice it. I kind of needed a line about his needing to, like, send out his heralds to, like, detect planets that have Celestials on them.
There is a line, because that was actually something that I've always wondered. And this book kind of fixed for me. At least it's like an idea. Obviously, it wouldn't be like the main universe thing. But somebody asks that question where they say, okay, but he found Silver Surfer's planet in the first place. Like, why does he need a herald? And they're like, well, the herald isn't there to actually find the planet. The herald is there to go to the planet and warn them that the Galactus is coming,
yes,
so that the people can leave.
And that's great. And that's where he ends up being kind of altruistic. And I like that idea that's why he's getting heralds. What I mean, though, is you'd think that part of a herald's job would be to, like, use his cosmic awareness to specifically point out the planets that have celestials in them. We're not told how Galactus knows that the planets he goes to have celestials in them. I don't know how he knows that.
I think it's probably just like something he can like feel the energy or something. I don't know. Like it's that type of a thing.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess you're saying then that like the Herald's only job is to go warn those planets, and that they're never actually seeking out the planet in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
it isn't both? Okay. Yeah, maybe so. Mm-hmm. That is a really cool idea. Like, I really don't mind that as a retcon for Galactus.
No, and that feels...
It kind of fits with everything. And also, like, the reason that Uatu uses the ultimate nullifier in the first place isn't because he's altruistic and he's trying to save people, but because his job is to make sure that the Celestial's okay, so he has to, like just watch and not affect anything unless that happened, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because at the start of this book, Uatu is like, Machine Man, who is X-51, he calls him in this book. He's like, a job of a watcher is to never interact with anyone, never. Like, you never do it. There's no reason to ever do it. And I'm like, okay, but there have been moments where Uatu has helped people, so I'm like, is this going to show up, or is this just a universe that never has?
Yeah, and it's built in.
And then they mention the ultimate nullifier and how he helped the Fantastic Four with that, and I'm like, okay, it's like that thing you hear and you go, okay, put a pin in that because that's going somewhere.
And it did.
And it does, yeah, and it's really good.
And it's a way better explanation than what it was in that book, which is we just need a Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
And the Watcher, I guess, just this time can't deal with all the people that are going to die. And, like, the Watcher is the villain of this book.
That's what I was about to say, yeah. The Watcher's ultimately the main villain.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
No, it's okay, because we're both going to the same place, but...
When you get to the end of this, the speech that Machine Man has... Because, first of all, I thought the book was turning on Machine Man toward the end. I thought that he was becoming the bad guy with the best of intentions. The Road to Hell thing. Where he was going to ruin everything in like a... Because honestly, I thought the book was going to end in a much more dour kind of travesty sort of place.
It kept me guessing the whole time.
Yeah, and it ends up being a happy ending, as somebody in the comments mentioned earlier, for pretty much everybody but Reed Richards. It ends up being a happy ending, and that should have been sappy, and it still worked, which was probably the most impressive thing about the book, honestly, is that it ends on a high note, because I wouldn't have thought that you'd want to end this on a high note.
This book has... a line at the very end that should be the sappiest thing I've ever read, but I'm like, no, it's kind of sweet.
with the Captain America speech and the Human Torch thing?
The Human Torch thing specifically.
I'm fine with it.
No, it works really well.
I'm fine with it.
The Captain America speech works really well. There is... Okay, so... you mentioned earlier, the beginning of every issue starts with like a history of a Marvel character. Mm-hmm. The end of every issue has like prose of like a discussion. And the second last one, I think...
That's not in the digital, by the way. Like, I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Oh, you didn't have, like, every issue ends with, like, just prose writing? Wow. That's crazy.
No, I don't know what you're talking about. You're looking at what I had. So, at the start of each issue, you get the page at the beginning of their discussion, and then it continues on. But you're saying as long as this there's still stuff I missed in it? That sucks.
There is a ton of stuff you missed.
Oh, apparently. Crazy.
So every issue ends with a discussion between the Watcher and X-51, where they discuss specifically like what's happened, and they kind of have a back and forth about how they feel about it.
Well, that's all
And
right. I wouldn't have had time to read all that anyway.
No, it's okay. Some of it I was starting to skim when it was like, okay, this is maybe overridden, but
I wonder if that was just added into the trades or if it was actually in the singles.
Possibly
in the first place, because I was reading digitals of the singles.
Mm-hmm. John Ty just says that the physical copy has it. Yeah, it's the appendix.
Somebody mentioned something about appendices. Yeah, and I missed that. Well, sorry I didn't finish the homework, but
no, it's okay. Most of it's just world building stuff where it's like, oh, what happened to this character? What happened to that character? But
I'm apologizing to Goofster. He's gonna be like, you didn't do the homework,
Yeah.
Page and review this book. You can't even read the lengthy prose things at the end of this 400-page book.
Yeah, and that's where you get Alex Ross art too. Is that it's like
I'm gonna make a new tier for this. I'm gonna make a 400-page tier for ReQuest.
But there's one that's
there's more Alex Ross art if you get that part.
Yeah, it's like around the prose.
Now I feel like I haven't even read this book.
But one of the last ones, maybe the last one, I can't remember. But it's a letter that Captain America writes about killing Red Skull. And it's like I really feel bad about killing you, and he kind of like breaks down his history of like struggling to kill people, like with the war and stuff.
See, that's good, because that felt like it should have been a bigger part of the book than it was. Because the intentional double beat of Captain America killed the Red Skull and now he kills another Red Skull is not brought enough. There's not enough attention brought to that.
Yeah, it's all in this letter.
Okay.
And it ends with a really beautiful Alex Ross drawing of Captain America having just buried Red Skull, like sitting at his grave.
Really? Well, yeah. I wish that I had gotten that so that we could also be looking at that here too.
Yeah, no, it's really nice. I can't remember where I was going with that. But, with the Captain America speech, like just some of that stuff I thought was like really well done and really. That one's not so much heartwarming because it's really sad and tragic, and it talks about like his guilt over Bucky and stuff like that.
And now that is a place where it feels a little bit less timeless, just because you have to keep reminding yourself that Winter Soldier is not a thing yet.
That is true, and I think that doesn't bother me as much because I'm so used to Ultimate, which is also like Bucky's not a thing yet, or Winter Soldier's
not a thing yet.
Yeah,
that's a good point. But I was enjoying reading this from the lens of, I kept imagining myself as like a younger person that grew up with the MCU, and then
I think it helps
them, and like the X-Men movies and stuff.
Yeah,
and then you turn around and read this, and it kind of just connects all these disparate things together. And then also, we need to touch on this. It's also really fascinating some of the things that this actually gets ahead on, both in movies and in comics. We have a female Thor here. You alluded to it earlier, but I did not know about that. You have a female Thor 15 years before Jason Aaron did it, and everybody freaked out and some people were upset about it and all of that. Now, it's not the passing Thor as a mantle thing.
It's Loki turned him into a woman.
Well, what's crazy is, inexplicably, he's just a woman. And characters are like, that's kind of weird. Don't know how he suddenly had a sex change. It's like, it was like he was playing a game of Munchkin. He just drew that card, he's got a sex change now, and he's just stuck with that. And then, you don't have to know what that is. That's a reference for anybody that's ever played that. But then... It's many issues later before we finally get the revelation that he was somehow Loki tricked Odin into turning him into a woman, I guess, and like that's never really explained. That's
what
never
I
really
love
talked
about that though is that Loki is the one that like that tricks Odin into doing it, but he also is constantly like, my brother, sister.
We talk about Loki a fair bit before that, and I kept wondering where he was. And then we finally get to him toward the end of the book. Like I said, just all this really great setup and payoff. We're like, you're not even sure, really up until issue 8 or 9, I think. I wasn't, I'll just speak for myself, I wasn't really sure how much I trusted a lot of the balls that were in the air with this book, where I kept going.
Oh, it's a ton.
Where's it going? Is it keeping track of all of this? How organized is it? And then by the end of the 9th issue, I was totally sold on it, and I was like, okay, clearly he's got all of his ducks in a row. You're just imagining, this is one of those books, right, where you're just imagining all the notes with the like string connected to it all over a wall somewhere, trying to keep all of this straight, and then you gotta imagine how difficult it is to put a thing like this together in the first place, because of like all the research with all of the mythology and history that you'd have to do, and just cherry picking and deciding like what elements to even use, and then again just the sheer number of creative like changes and retcons and things that we do. I don't know how you even organize a thing like this.
No, I feel like this book is like a guy comes up to you and he's got just like a bucket full of marbles. And he's like, check this out. I can throw all these marbles in the air and then catch all of them. And then he like throws the bucket up and like all the marbles go flying everywhere. And then you're just kind of watching like, what the heck? And then they put their headphones on and it's Fox Quicksilver. And he collects all of them real quick. It turns into one of those sequences. But for a second you're like, okay.
It's kind of a tour de force. I mean, it's impressive. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah. No, and I think you can tell that this person started as a novelist too, just by how they write.
One of my complaints until I got halfway through, I wholly expected to come into this review saying, this shouldn't have been drawn, this should have been a novel. It really read that way to me. And I didn't feel that way as much by the end, especially because it is structured very much like a novel. And it's wordy, and it's got kind of too much language for for words and pictures. But then when by the time I get to the end, I'm won over on the format a lot more. And I know that's weird to say because it is a comic book, but like, I felt like it was struggling to justify being a comic book. And then by the time I got to the end, I was like, I'm glad I was able to see all these characters, because I couldn't have kept all these people straight. Mm-hmm. Like I needed to look at them, and also where you need it to be visual, besides all the Alex Ross art that I missed apparently, where you need it to be visual is in just seeing the ways that all of the characters have changed in the future. Like, you do want to get to see that, and like, new costumes and the Spider Girl and all of that stuff.
Mm. Yeah, and Captain America has like a flag draped around him.
Well, I was gonna say there are plot points that are easier to render visually than they would be. Like, it becomes a much more visual book by the end. Like, this is not a cinematic thing. Like, it's really not. But when you get to the end, it gets a lot closer to that when you have plot points like Captain America was pretending to be an evil clay Captain America, and then he breaks out of that. Like, much easier to visualize than to try to explain that in prose.
Well, even same with just a lot of that Kirby stuff at the end with the Celestials.
Yeah.
Just visually. Another big thing that this predates is President Norman Osborn.
I was just about to mention that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That has been a thing since this.
Yeah. That was, I think, one of the parts early on where I was like, okay, I feel like this is being too slow, as we keep mentioning President Norman Osborn, but we're not seeing it yet.
Yeah.
And that was one of those things where like we keep referencing it. I'm like, okay, but when are we going to get there?
Yeah, same thing I had with Loki.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And then when we finally do get him, he dies immediately. So it feels like this like long gag where he's like, okay, this character's going to die, but we're going to keep mentioning him because he's important.
There was another change, like kind of subtle. I can't even say change, but like explanation for something. I wanted to ask you how you felt about, because some of this feels like I said, it really is in a lot of ways. The more I'm thinking about it, the more we're discussing it. Kind of like the opposite of what Kingdom Come is about, which is very appropriate in looking at the two companies. And one of the things it'll do is it'll come up with a kind of more sober, realistic explanation for something kind of goofy in the early days of Marvel, the early Stan Lee days. Not because necessarily like everything has to be more grounded and down to earth, but because for the sake of this book, it's just a lot more serious, and also one of the main like kind of goals of this book seems to be to like wrap everything together and make it feel like more of a unified universe. So one of the things I thought was fascinating that I couldn't stop thinking about, and I got to know your take on it, is the explanation for why Magneto calls the evil his group of mutants evil. Why does he call them that?
Oh yeah, I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
That's one of those things you just kind of laugh at.
The evil brotherhood. It's like he is. It's so ironic retroactively when you start getting a Magneto, because obviously it's a little bit later that he gets as sympathetic as he does.
Mm-hmm. Well, as much as people will try to throw it out there, X-Men does not start as like a civil rights allegory.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely a thing.
Yeah,
with the evil mutants thing.
He's just mustached really early on, and
exactly.
So he's leading a group like it's much more Saturday morning cartoon, and he's leading a group. We should review that stuff at some point. That'd be really funny.
We should. I've read it before.
And I also have always wanted to do the first 10 issues of Daredevil, because I like the early Daredevil Yellow stuff a lot more than most people do.
Well, we talked about doing the Romita stuff, so...
Oh, yes, because he just passed away.
That's not long after. I think he starts on... I think he's 12 to 19.
That was the thing we wanted to do when we do a Romita tribute, and I wish we could have dropped everything and just done it already, because that just happened a couple days ago. Mm-hmm. But...
It is what it is.
We will try to do that soon, folks.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, the explanation in this is... and I like this because it speaks... to like the grander themes of the narrative. You've got the Watcher constantly saying there is no such thing as good and evil, and he is ultimately the most evil thing there is, according to X-51 by the end. And the book makes a great case for it, because he stands back and does nothing when bad things happen to people, and he doesn't care. And like the way that plays into the power of responsibility thing with Spider-Man, and the way that that's flipped, that's all interconnected. Like thematically, everything is really tight in the same way it is plot-wise. Mm-hmm. And that's really impressive. But anyway, so the way that factors in is we're told that Magneto called his group evil because he wanted to frame himself the way this stupid comic book universe that he lives in would. And say, well, anybody that professes that they are good, that makes a big deal out of, look how righteous I am, they always have an ulterior motive. There's always a line of bad in there. And he says, if I declare I'm evil, there has to be more to me than that. I'm basically declaring, and I don't buy that anybody would pick up on that, but I'm basically declaring I can't be evil, because who would be crazy enough to call themselves that? And then that's playing into the also grander theme of most bad guys think they're doing the right thing in some way. And you have that in this with everybody that really, except for the Watcher and the Skull.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the evil mutants thing reminds me of Transformers Prime. There's a thing like that where there's an arc where Optimus Prime gets amnesia, and he thinks he's friends with Megatron, and he's like, why are we called Decepticons? Like, our name literally has deception in it. And Megatron's like, yeah, that's like this rude term they use to call us, so we've decided to embrace it.
We commandeered it.
Exactly.
Those bigots, we'll show them.
Yeah.
Well, and I meant to mention, speaking of Magneto, I almost said Megatron. Megatron, well, and I feel like in more recent Transformers stuff, Megatron is getting more and more like Magneto.
Maybe?
He's got a little of that in the Netflix show. I will say that.
That's true. I haven't watched that in a while.
Oh, okay.
I've only seen the first 2 seasons.
I don't know, he's got a little bit of like people were bigoted against us, and we have to band together and show that we're superior. And he's got a little bit of that.
Well, I've always said there's a lot of X-Men in that series. I mean, it's
the kind of
it's partly made by Marvel, so there's a lot of Marvel in the identity of that.
Yeah, framing them as like second-class citizens and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
But speaking of Magneto, I just wanted to mention that the plot, because we haven't even talked about Black Bolt. Speaking of pseudo-villain plots that are done for the best of intentions, and Black Bolt is not framed as a bad guy, but the thing he does is probably not smart. You could make a case that it's sort of like a bad guy plot. Black Bolt decides to. He is the reason. This is another of our big twists that we get like 6 in a row, and this is one of them. In the last like 3 issues, Black Bolt spread the Terrigen Mist on everybody so that everybody would be an Inhuman or a mutant, however you like it. It's so interesting, again, looking at this after movies and TV shows where we had that period where Fox and Marvel were fighting each other and Marvel had to turn the Inhumans into the X-Men. And I didn't realize that years and years before, we correlated those way closer than I thought we ever had before with this. But he goes, let's make everybody Inhumans, and then we'll all be the same, and then we don't have to worry about peaceful coexistence because we're all one species. Does that remind anybody of anything? That's the Magneto plot in the first X-Men film, which, by the way, comes out the same year as that issue. Crazy.
Oh, wow. That's crazy, yeah.
Yeah. Well, because this starts in 99, and
so
it's 14 issues, so that had to have come out in 2000.
Yeah, good call. Yeah, because I didn't even think of the X-Men thing until you said it to me off camera.
I'm highly sensitive to that plot because it shows up so much. So, like, Amazing Spider-Man with the Lizard in the third act, I'm like, this is just Magneto. So, like, every time I see it, like, it hits me like a ton of bricks. The best version
of it is Batman versus Two-Face. That's, like, the only version of it that's brilliant.
That one's pretty great. Where you just have Chief O'Hara, he's like,
well, he's like, I'm gonna release my chemical in the sky that will turn everyone into Two-Face.
Everybody's Two-Face.
It's brilliant.
Maybe a little bit too much with just those 2 movies. Everybody's got to be one thing. You got all these Batmans, you got all these Two-Faces, but at least Batman's not turning people into Batman. I guess he's cloning himself, but
yeah, exactly.
I digress. Nobody cares about this.
Exactly.
Anyway, but yeah, so that was the thing I noticed, and then talk about the Eternals thing. We alluded to it, but the movie Eternals thing.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's got the same plot as Eternals, where the Celestial's going to be born out of the earth, and all the main characters have to stop it. And this goes like way bigger and like way more sci-fi, which is like so crazy because that was one of the big things that a lot of people who liked that movie talked about, is like, oh, they just made like a straight up sci-fi thing. And then I look at this and I'm like, oh, they went like way farther with it. Like we go crazy in this.
Now, to be fair, you couldn't have gone as far as that does in this, because that would have, and I think it would have been unfair too, because you would have been handcuffing everybody else after that.
No, of course.
You know, to say that like the Celestials put that seed in everybody.
Well, I wouldn't want that in like a mainstream Marvel thing. Like I said, I only like that as an idea because it's like an alternate universe.
That also starts to get a little bit too close to something like, I mean, it's not the same thing, but just the way you'd be hamstrung with it, like like Superman being the MacGuffin of his own movie in Man of Steel, like the Codex thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. I didn't think of that.
It's not exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there's like it's kind of similar.
There's a hint of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got like the same villain plot. The big difference here is that like all the Celestials show up, and then it becomes like a big battle with them. and
and it's a big battle that the humans really aren't involved in. I mean, it's just Galactus versus the Celestials, and you get a thing that you would rarely get in a superhero movie, which is your resolution is Reed Richards talks the bad guy down, which is super sad because it turns out that Galactus is actually Franklin Richards, and we'll have to explain that because kind of complicated, but
it becomes the it thing where you can believe things and they'll exist.
Yeah, explain what the Asgardians are in this, because that's probably the biggest, craziest departure.
Yes, the Asgardians like aren't a thing. Like it's they exist as aliens because of mythology. Same with like Zeus and Hercules and all that, where we create them. So we say like, okay, Loki's the mischievous one, he's the bad one, and that's why they also can, like, it's been thousands of years and they've never grown or changed. They're always stuck in, okay, this is their status quo and they can't leave it.
It's a great explanation for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So that's like how the Asgardians work, and I really like the idea that all of the Asgardians reject this as knowledge except for Loki, because he's the only one that's mischievous enough to understand what they're saying.
And it's supposed to explain this to me, because I didn't quite get this. It's supposed to somehow play into what we're told is a celestial failsafe, where it is possible for people, when they get their powers, to become as powerful as Celestials, and something about what happens to the Asgardians is supposed to explain why they're not allowed to get to that point. I didn't really understand the correlation there.
I think it's that like imagination thing. Like, it's Franklin Richards can be Galactus because he and Reed Richards believe that he's Galactus, which is how the Asgardians work. So I think that's supposed to be the idea, is the ultimate like foregone conclusion of the power mutation thing is that you're essentially like a shapeshifter.
Oh, we are told that you would become a shapeshifter.
You believe, you'll become that as long
but
as
almost like a physical empathic metamorph or something, where somebody has to think of you that way for you to become that, or can think you out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Which is why starting tomorrow, I will just keep believing I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger until I am.
It's the cosmic version of fake it till you make it.
Exactly.
I love that idea.
Yeah, it's really cool. No, I thought all that stuff really worked. It was a really interesting idea. Again, you wouldn't want that for like a mainline Marvel universe with like the Asgardians, but it's really cool for an alternate take.
No, but and actually, I'm reading into this way too far when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I just had this thought and I kind of like it.
Do it.
What if Alex Ross or this actual writer is thinking, I keep forgetting his name, Kruger. What if Ross or Kruger is putting this together just after the comic crash, or while that's happening? And because that's when they're putting this together, and they're thinking, what if finances were so bad the company got shut down? How would you end the Marvel universe? Because you say you wouldn't want this for mainline, but if we actually had to end it and we were going to make no more comics, it's about the best way to do it. I wouldn't
want to have to like deal with that in a
Marvel
universe.
Same here. But what if this was the canonical end of the Marvel universe? Pretty good.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Not a bad way to go.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a perfectly fine way to end the Marvel universe.
Do you think it's possible they were thinking that? And that's part of the reason they went this way, where it's like, well, let's just imagine, like our livelihoods are on the line. Let's just imagine we have to shut the whole kit and caboodle down.
Possibly. I didn't think about it like that, but that's really interesting.
I didn't either until just now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe. That might be part of what they were thinking. What was I going to say? I don't know. I lost what I was going to say next.
Yeah, apologies.
No, it's okay.
I just had that stray thought. I had to get it out there. So when you get to the end of this, one of the other real big ongoing ideas here that we haven't really discussed so much is related to the godhood thing with the Asgardians, which is if you are, I think, if there's like a big moral to the story beyond there really is such a thing as good and evil, and it lays out what it thinks evil is, and I think I kind of agree with it. The other big kind of moral that we get here, besides like we can find a way to all get along, it's certainly got that at the end, is the point of leaders and the point of gods, who in this are framed as parental figures and like mentors, is supposed to be to serve their constituents and their underlings and not the other way around. And the Asgardians are a perfect encapsulation of that. They are actually much less powerful at the end of the day than human beings and are hamstringed to be whatever they were imagined as, because they're there to serve the people who imagined them and not the other way around. And at the end of the day, that's why the Celestials lose, because they created people just to protect their young and didn't create people for their own ends, and that's ultimately their demise, and that's ultimately Uatu's demise. That's all interconnected also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. No, I thought that was really interesting. There's a lot of like really big ideas like that this book, I don't think you realize like early on it's gonna get like as crazy and out there and heady as it is. Like obviously it's written that way early on, but like you don't really have a sense that it's gonna be like about things in the way it ultimately is.
Yeah, because I was bored. I was like, yeah, I've read Marvel Comics before, guys. I don't need you to explain to me what the Inhumans are. You know, I'm good. Like, I guess I appreciate the history lesson. It's been a little while, but why do I need to know all of this right now? There's a part of me that wants to suggest that you don't even start this book until like issue 4 or 5 and then go back at the end and read the first 4. I'm not actually going to say that, but I do think that the biggest strike against it is you gotta hang on for too long before, or at least I did, before you're really gonna get sucked into it, and then it becomes like one of the best, kind of event book sort of things I've ever read from Marvel.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I've always said that you've got to you've got to write with the mentality that no one wants to read your story, even if that's not true with a thing like this, where it's like, well, we're already invested in these characters. You're maybe gonna show up just for Captain America or Spider-Man or whoever it is. You still, as a writer, no matter how much clout you have, don't want to be entitled enough to go, well, yeah, they'll hang on with me for 150 boring pages before it finally gets going and gets interesting. Yeah,
well, but then at the
same time, I don't really know how to fix it. Because I know that when I read it again and I know where it's all going, it's not going to read as boring.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is because I like all of the individual scenes with characters, like, all the way throughout. My main issue for the longest time is the Watcher stuff. Where the Watcher stuff is, I think, very repetitive early on, and it feels like it's the same conversation over and over again. And I think
on a second read that'll even seem more warranted, though.
Exactly, because you're going to know where it's going, because it is going somewhere.
Well, and I think even the repetition of it might read as, if not necessary,
some of that
executed
stuff
well.
Is really good.
Yeah, I almost want, again, you wouldn't want to actually do this. I almost just want a disclaimer that says all this stuff with Uatu and X-51 is more than just a framing device. Mm-hmm. Like, that's going to become the story at some point, don't worry.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was getting bored with it, is I'm like, okay, this framing device is just kind of, like, it's overridden, it's going on too long, like, get me back to scenes, please. And then it eventually does become really interesting.
I didn't know that Uatu was going to ultimately kind of be the villain of the piece, and that X-51 was going to be one of the big saviors of the piece. Yeah, same here, and like,
giant blue face on
kind of a big evil scary Zordon, but a Zordon nevertheless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I feel like we can't do a video without Zordon. Have you noticed that?
Is that a thing? I don't
know.
It
seems like Zordon comes up like every other video.
Oh, I don't know.
I mean, I do a lot of Power Rangers content, but even outside of that,
this was the first time I've referenced it, though.
Yeah, but I mean, it comes up a lot. So you say that, somebody's gonna find the video or two where he's like, "Nope, there's Austin talking about Zordon."
Make a Geekvolution Austin Zordon compilation every time I've said it.
I mean,
send me
it'll
that
be
video.
short, but it's probably more than just this.
We'll see.
That's all I'm saying. Hey, we got a super chat earlier that I didn't read. Senior Sticks put in a $2 super chat and says, "What does Captain Logan look like in Earth X?" Yeah, the question is, am I cool, badass, like long white beard Captain Logan, like buff?
Oh, I've had an answer since the second that super chat came in.
Or am I Wolverine on the couch drinking too many beers? Like,
do you have an answer before I give mine?
No, go ahead.
You're Iron Man, but instead of making things, you're like wired into different things that allow you to watch like all these different stuff, and then you're like, okay, you watch it and you review it.
Oh, that's cool. Or do I have like a bunch of LMDs that do my reviewing for me even?
No, so all of your co-hosts died, and then you have robot versions of them.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. So they're not even me. There's like a Vince over here and a Jason and a you and a DJ. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like wired in as like just actual Captain Logan watching stuff, and then you have like the robot Geekvolution League that come in. And
that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
That's my answer.
How did you feel about the way Iron Man was handled in this?
I loved Iron Man
because you suggested off camera that there was that it had a little bit in common with how Ross handled Batman in Kingdom Come.
Yeah, early on, because it's not as like totalitarian.
No, it's not.
But it's that same like he's like. He can't move like himself, like he's wired into a building. Not that Batman's wired in, but he's got like that mech suit thing that like keeps him connected. And he has so all the Avengers died years ago, and he has robot versions of them that are the Iron Avengers, and he has them cleaning up the streets. Later on, you find out that he has enough Iron Man armors in his like home warehouse thing that he could police the entire world with them, which was his plan when he created them, except he got there and then went, okay, but if I do this, like, I will take over the world, and I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
So, like, that's part in how he's different than Batman. It's also interesting with Iron Man.
Yeah, he hasn't lost himself in the same way.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. No, and he's the only human in this, because he lives in just, like, a sanitized room where he has no like Terrigen Mist.
Oh, that's a good point. He doesn't get changed.
No,
I didn't even have that thought.
Yeah, because there's a part where the Iron Avengers come back to him, and they have to go through like this huge cleanup thing where like they're washed down, they're like sanitized before they can even get into a room with Tony. And then there's a part where Steve like teleports into his room, and Tony freaks out because he's like, "You've broken my." Like quarantine thing here, like you're gonna ruin this.
That's why. Okay, I didn't realize it was a plot point that he wasn't superpowered.
Because there's a part later on where he says that like he's such like a damaged person just as is. He doesn't want to know what he looks like mutated like everybody else. Like he doesn't even want to see what that looks like.
How cool of a plot point would that have been in an MCU movie, where you do a movie where everybody gets superpowers and Tony Stark does not want them?
That would have been cool.
That would have been really cool.
That would have been really cool.
I mean, you could see a great contrivance for that based on the way he reacted to there just being aliens in the universe.
Well, in that, because I also said to you off camera that there's a lot of MCU Iron Man in this.
Yeah.
And that specifically is in this, because there's a part where it shows the original Avengers thing, and it's like, it does a close-up of Iron Man when they first fought Loki, and it was like, Tony realized right then that he had to form the Avengers, not because of Loki, but because the idea of Loki meant that there was other people like this out there, and he couldn't live in a world like that, and like he had to find a way to like fix that.
Yeah, that's Iron Man 3 is all about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, just like everything after Avengers is like that with Iron Man.
Yeah.
The whole I need a suit. I need suits around the world to clean up the streets is Avengers Age of Ultron.
I really want to know if there's any 616 stuff doing that, or if that idea actually came from this, because I'm starting to think that maybe more like movie people and creators have read this than I would have expected, given what happened with Eternals.
Yeah, for sure.
Austin, in case you're skeptical, Austin sent me the article where the people working on that movie were talking about Earth X.
Oh, it was the writer of this book. They asked him about the Eternals movie, and he was like, when this book came out, I was hanging out with Kevin Feige, and Kevin Feige was like, I love this book. It's so cool. And like, I want to make it into a movie at some point. And the writer was like, yeah, but like you would do it as Eternals, right? Because it's like a celestial thing. Like that's the way that makes the most sense.
And then that's kind of what happened.
And then that's what happened. And it was like 25 years before that movie came out. That's crazy.
Not actually, but yes, it was a long time before that.
Yeah. No, it's nuts. What was I saying with Iron Man?
Oh, actually, yeah. I guess maybe it was Claw. I mean, 99? Yeah, 21.
Yeah, it's like 20-something.
Yeah, it's crazy.
No, it's incredibly crazy. With Iron Man. This book also, I think, really, really hurts the ending of Endgame, which I already don't like how they kill off Iron Man. But, like, he gets the perfect ending in this book. And there's just, like, that part of me that goes, like, why couldn't he have had something like this?
Yeah, and you couldn't have straight up done this book because it would have kind of, in some ways, ended your universe. I mean, I guess not. Like, you could have kind of made...
You could take elements.
I don't know. Could you have done basically the end of this book instead of the blip, where it's like the status quo is everybody had powers and now they don't anymore, and they got to deal with that? Like, you could have done that.
Yeah, possibly, but I think it's fine doing the Thanos stuff instead.
No, I do too. I'm just saying, for a second, I was thinking this would have been too world breaking. And I'm not even saying I need this or I wish they'd done that instead. I'm just saying, like, in an alternate universe where they looked at this maybe on top of or instead of Infinity Gauntlet, I actually think there's a possibility for room for this in an ongoing narrative.
I feel like this like the Infinity War stuff, I wouldn't want to see it continue after that. Like, it's like, I think this would be much more of a definitive ending than that was if you were to adapt it closer to.
I wanted to mention this page in particular because there's this unintentionally hilarious moment to me where it really looks like the Statue of Liberty is talking.
Oh yeah, I had that too.
And I was like, wait a minute,
what?
Who's talking right now? Oh, it's whoever was was it Loki or I can't remember.
It's Mr. Fantastic.
Mr. Fantastic, yeah.
That's whoever was big emotional moment between him and Galactus.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay. By the way, this is the last point I want to make before we wrap up here. We're already at an hour and a half. I think we did okay though. There's a lot in this book. We haven't really mentioned the fact that Galactus is not Galactus at all, or I guess we have because we mentioned that it's Franklin Richards. But I just wanted to real quick mention how fun it is. Well, two things about Reed Richards, but how fun it is that Reed Richards somehow at some point turned Galactus into a star. And then when he shows back up, it's a good long time before we understand what he is. And I keep going, I'm kind of looking at my watch going, okay, when are you finally going to reveal it? Because people keep asking, like, what if this isn't Galactus, what is it? And I'm like, you're gearing me up for something, and I'm trusting you at this point because of all of the revelations that I've found very satisfying. But it was a weird long time where we kept seeing Galactus and I didn't know what it was, and then when we finally find out what it is, I'm like, nope, that's pretty good too. Like,
I think that worked for me because I was genuinely like, but I mean, if it's not Galactus, what could it be?
What is
I don't know.
And I was glad it wasn't just some random Asgardian. Like I liked that there was a setup.
Just another Nick Fury.
I like there was a good setup and payoff to that also, because we should have kind of been wondering where Franklin Richards was. We weren't told that he was killed or anything.
When there's retroactively when I hit that, I was like, oh, there was setup for this earlier.
Yeah.
Because somebody asks about Franklin Richards, and I forget what exactly he says, but there's something about like, oh, we haven't spoken in a long time or whatever. It's like there is setup for that.
What did you think of Silver Surfer and his wife being dual heralds of Galactus?
I don't know enough about Silver Surfer, so I was like, who the heck is this? And then they died, and they're like, oh, it was his wife.
Oh, it's his wife!
And I was like, oh, okay.
That's a Shalabal. But I was like, wow, that's crazy. Never seen that before.
Yeah, no, that was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool. The other super cool thing with Reed Richards is that he literally stretches his mind in order to become telepathic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in order to use Cerebro.
Or I guess just telepathic enough to use Cerebro. I was like, that's pretty cool. That makes him pretty darn powerful.
Yeah.
But that's a pretty cool use of his powers, nevertheless.
Well, I mean, that's why he's called Mr. Fantastic. So this has, I almost sent it to you, and I forgot to when I got to it. When it's doing the Fantastic Four origin, there's a video that's like a read through of like that initial origin issue, and they have like different actors play different roles. And Norm Macdonald is Mr. Fantastic, and it slowly goes off and like becomes a parody. But they almost do like word for word the beginning of that, where it's like, oh, and then Sue Storm became invisible, and she became the Invisible Woman, and then the Human Torch, like, he lit on fire, he was the Human Torch, and then the Thing turned into a monster, he was the Thing, and then Mr. Fantastic could stretch.
That's great. Austin, anything else about this you want to make sure that we mention? There's tons of other stuff, obviously, but we're gonna have to cap off someplace. So yeah take us wherever you want to take us. I think I'm about done.
So I was saying earlier with the Iron Man death thing with with Endgame, I love how he becomes the Yinsen to Mr. Fantastic's Iron Man. All of that was wonderful, and I'm like, why couldn't we have done this in the MCU? It's so much better than like the cheap way they actually killed him.
Well, and you really liked we talked about this off camera too, but like the breakdown of Reed Richards versus
Tony's got a great speech where he's like, Mr. Fantastic, like, you're a person that was driven and super smart and always knew exactly what you wanted, but me, like, I had that intelligence, but I never knew what to do with it. So like it was this constant like, okay, I do this. Oh, but then there's like the next thing I want to do, and then I get there, and then there's the next thing I want to do, and I can never be like content with where I am or like where I'm going to be. And that's such a good breakdown of both of those characters. And he also does it while in a Celestial Buster armor that is the warehouse that he lives in breaks open, and it's a giant Iron Man suit that is filled with little Iron Man armors that he shoots out.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I don't think I had ever really thought to like compare those two genius minds in that way before, and I think that's a lot of what gives this book so much credibility when it's adding new explanations for things or doing slight retcons to stuff, where like it's proving how much it really understands these characters, and it gives it a credibility that allows it to go its own way and change things and make up new reasons for stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Because like that idea in how they're different is perfectly encapsulated just in their origins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Where like Iron Man is having to react to things, and he's basically just like an improv inventor. He's like, okay, my heart's all messed up. I got to make this thing so that I can stay alive, and then now this big threat happens. I got to make this thing. But like Reed Richards is playing chess.
Mm-hmm.
Like Iron Man,
Mr. Fantastic's always like inventing and just doing what he wants. But
he's also always guessing at what's going to happen later. Like,
mm-hmm.
like, what do I have to make in order to stop this problem that could happen down the line? And then if this other permeation happens, how do I do that? And like that's I think kind of the basis for the Maker. Like, there's a reason that mind could go real dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, for all of his flaws and for how broken Iron Man can be, you never imagine him as going like bad in that way. That's also kind of the big difference between him and like MCU Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a part where Uatu calls Mr. Fantastic insane, and I'm shocked he didn't just straight up say like, yeah, Mr. Fantastic is like always on that line of like, here's insanity, here's brilliance.
And John Ty says, does the stretching his mind come from this? I thought the first idea of that was from the Maker. Apparently not, because...
Doesn't the Maker come later?
This predates that. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the Ultimate Universe comes later.
That's what I mean, because that's where I thought it came from.
Yep.
Yeah. No, because when he said it, I was like, "Is there a maker thing before that I'm not thinking?"
But yeah, that's
of?
what I'm saying, John. Like, no, it has to be by default because this book predates that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I'm not making up that the mind stretching is in this book because Austin read it too, and he can corroborate it.
Exactly,
it's in there.
Yeah, and that's like late Ultimate Universe. That's like years past this.
Do you know how excited I got when we got to Galactus in this?
Oh, I imagined it because when I got to it, I was like, Cap's probably freaking out when he gets here. I hit a point near the end where I'm like, okay, because we'd kind of talked before this, and I knew you were a little bit down on it. And I was like, if Cap's not grinning ear to ear at this part, like, I don't know him at all.
No, what's weird is it suddenly feels like, a great, wonderful Galactus story. Mm-hmm. And it's not even actually Galactus. Like, it does add some things to his character retroactively. The actual Galactus we see is not Galactus. And you'd think that would be disappointing. But it wasn't.
No, and it works really well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This book is really good.
It's really good.
Like, overall, it's quite spectacular.
Yeah.
And I would just suggest to anybody that's kind of struggling with it at the beginning, like, give it those first 4 issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going somewhere.
And if you have to skim some of it, do that. And if you miss some things,
yeah,
because I think that there's a decent amount of recapping later on where anything you missed will come back in such a way where it will probably catch you up well enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found the stuff that I was starting to skim the most.
That's why I said you could almost start later. I don't actually think you should do that, but you almost could.
I think the stuff that I started to skim the most was like the middle appendices, especially because a lot of it was just like world building about characters I don't care about.
I skipped all of that accidentally.
Yeah, you didn't even know it existed.
I didn't know about that.
Although I will say early on, I think it's like issue 2, this book has the most relatable line I've ever heard in any piece of media.
What is that?
Which is, we're doing the like history thing where it's like, and this is how this happened, this is how that happened. And that one's Namor, and X-51 goes, why do I have to hear so much about Namor? I'm like,
I'm with you.
God, that's so relatable.
That is pretty...
Especially for like early Stanley Namor.
That is pretty relatable. Because who cares about Namor?
And I love how there's almost a joke about it too, where it's like Namor was really important back then.
You know how? Because I was worried about pretentiousness early on, because it felt like a big epic thing, but it didn't feel like it was getting anywhere, and it was like, here's the whole Marvel universe laid out in front of you. I'm like, I mean, I've read Marvel comics, I don't know. And then the end of every issue had to have some kind of pretentious sounding quote from something. Like, we have to do that whole thing. And I'm like, oh boy, I don't know if I'm going to like this. The one at the end of, like, it even won me over on those. The one at the end of, I think it's the issue that tells you, that finally reveals the Terrigen Mist and how everybody became mutants. The quote is Paul Harvey's, and now you know the rest of the story. And I was like, that's amazing. What a choice. That was a pretty good choice.
Well, then it was really weird because the Black Bolt one, where Black Bolt dies, just says, "You've been struck by a smooth criminal, Michael Jackson."
No, it doesn't. It didn't say, no. There was another one that I took a note on that I wanted to mention, and I'm trying to figure out why I took this. I don't know. I'll figure it out. Oh, I know what it is. This was Jameson talking to the Watcher.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of the end scene with Jameson where he's a horseman. But okay, yeah. John Jameson.
Yeah, no, J. Jonah Jameson, I thought the idea was supposed to be that he literally turned into an ass. Is that the idea?
Oh, that's one of those things where it's like art, so it's kind of hard to say. So my head went horse, but you're right. It is probably he turned into a donkey.
He turned into a donkey. They made J. Jonah Jameson in his mutant form a literal ass. I think that's what we're doing with that. Yeah. But that's not what I was.
The part about it is that he has the Jameson mustache on the donkey face. But anyways, go ahead.
So it was kind of odd how involved in the story John Jameson was.
Yeah,
and he's pretty good.
And for the longest time, I was like, oh, he's in like Eternals. He's the one that's like, no, we have to let the Celestial be born. Like he's the bad guy of that movie.
Yeah.
And then he ultimately isn't, but for the longest time, it looks like that's the way it's going.
No, he's endearing at the end of the day, but there's this great line in one of those opening pages where it's just text and it's just a discussion or an argument until you get to the art.
Yeah,
and John Jameson says something to Uatu. Yeah, he says he's Machine Man, isn't he? And I cut some of this off, but he asks a question, and then Uatu says, because he's only referring to Machine Man as it. He says, it believes that what man is what man must remain. It is unwilling to sacrifice nostalgia for the sake of new life.
Mm-hmm. That's a great line.
This is a timeless book.
Yeah.
This is a book that is relevant today, folks. Maybe more so than it was when it came out.
Yeah, since you have those parts, that's what the appendices are like, but they're a lot longer. Like it's and like more writing. Like nobody's saying one word lines.
I'll have to go back and finally read that. I also thought it was hilarious that the Celestials killed the dinosaurs.
Oh yeah. Instead of the Ice Age.
John Ty, $2 super chat. So Hickman probably read Earth X. He's saying that because of the Ultimate stuff. I think all of those guys probably read this.
Well, I think earlier he said something about the appendices. His X-Men run has something like that. He also said that
Hickman writes like that, though. I don't think he needed to have looked at this to have been inspired to do that. Like,
yeah, that's possible. John Ty also said that Whedon does the introduction in the physical copy of this book.
Yeah, and he would have been... Would this have been just before his X-Men?
I'm not sure. Probably.
I want to say that's not until like 02 or 03.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even a little later than that.
Yeah.
Astonishing.
When Whedon does the...
Is he writing at the same time as Morrison's X-Men, or does he come in after Morrison? I'm rusty on this. I don't remember anymore.
So I don't know a ton about X-Men, but I always thought he was after.
That's
like he was like the next writer, or like the next big writer at least.
It'd be really funny if they were at the same time, though, and it was like dueling books, sort of like Morrison had with Dini in Batman. Really funny if it happened at the exact same time.
Yeah, exactly.
John Ty said he wrote the foreword in the 2000s, so it was probably while he was doing Astonishing then.
Mm-hmm. Well, he does the foreword for Ultimates, which makes sense because there's a ton of that in his first Avengers movie. So he was definitely looking at comics at this time.
Well, Austin, are we in pretty good shape with this?
Yes.
Are we ready? Are we ready to close out?
There's like 8,000 other things that we could talk about that are small, but we don't have time for that.
So much more. Yeah. We didn't talk about Daredevil. I don't know how you feel about that.
Doctor Strange. Yeah. Daredevil I thought was pretty funny.
Evil Clea. You've got a new Daredevil who's like a literal motorcycle Daredevil guy who can't die and he just wants to die.
He's almost weirdly Ghost Rider and Daredevil combined into one character.
Yeah, and then comic relief almost as if Deadpool was in this book, although like not constantly talking and not irritating, but I kind of saw him as a stand-in for Deadpool.
Yeah, there was a moment I had that thought where they find Tony dead and they're like, everyone's sad. And then Daredevil's like, oh, why couldn't it have been me?
I wish it had been me. I don't know, that was funny.
No, that was pretty funny. But I was like, okay, that is funny, but if that happened in a movie, that would be one of the lines that we all complain about as being like a scene ruiner.
Yeah, because we're too sensitive to it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And don't get me wrong, it gets irritating, but it's getting to the point now where we're looking for it.
Mm-hmm. No, it's because you can feel the beat coming.
Yeah.
Yep. He wasn't Korg, though.
It's kind of like sometimes political pandery things where it's like, is it really pandery, or do we just feel like we see it enough that it feels like it is? Like,
you just become oversensitive to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know.
But Evil Clea was cool. She killed Doctor Strange, but only his spirit, so his body's still alive, but his spirit's in the death realm.
Yeah, and then he's out there going like, I got killed. Sucks.
That scene really got me because
he's like the only spirit that's aware that he's dead.
Yeah,
he can't make anybody else aware of it.
Well, he's talking to Hulk, who Bruce Banner is in the regular world, and he can see and hear what Hulk does.
Yeah,
and Doctor Strange is like, "Don't tell anybody that's around you who you're talking to right now." And I was like, oh, like, interesting. Like, what's going to happen? And then he's like, oh, the dark person that killed me. And I'm like, oh, we're going to get Dormammu in this book? And then...
No, it turns out it's Clea, who we've already met, but we didn't know that she's going to be bad.
Yeah, that twist really got me. That was cool.
Her costume was cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing that we did, because when we killed off Doctor Strange, like, a year or two ago, we did Clea as the Sorcerer Supreme.
Oh, but not, like, evil.
Not evil, no. That's another thing this book beat us to.
I mean, I feel like there are some things this book does that might have been just inevitable at some point, but you got to wonder how many of them are things that somebody actually took from this book.
Mm. Yeah, for sure.
And how much of it is just it was ahead of its time, or...
Yeah, or just things that, like you said, anybody could get to.
Well, Austin, the request for next time... And I didn't mean for these to line up next to each other like that, so I apologize.
Uh-oh.
But the next thing is also a somewhat lengthy comic arc.
We're doing Justice.
No.
Made by the same writer.
No, we're doing 0 Year.
Oh, cool.
Which I've never reviewed front to back.
Yeah.
And it's the only part of that run that Austin likes, so...
That's not true.
Oh, I thought it was true.
Possibly. I don't know. I haven't read a lot of it in a long time.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty much all that you liked from Snyder, Batman.
I like Court of the Owls well enough. It drops off at the end, but like, yeah, I remember liking that.
I think most of us can agree with that, but
yeah, I don't like how they're everywhere now.
No. How do you feel about Death of the Family?
It's been so long, I barely remember it.
But see, that's one of those things that I liked fine, except it had to be a big event that went through all the other books.
Yeah.
You could read it without that,
tie-in stuff,
but it did feel like it impacted it to some degree, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I guess I'm indifferent to that because I don't really remember. But I don't know, I like Snyder well enough.
Did you ever read the end of it?
No.
Did you ever read the Bloom stuff? Because that's awful.
I don't think I ever got past 0
It's
Year.
not
I ended there.
Awful. There's good stuff in it. But it was conceptually it was a misstep in the first place. Like,
oh, okay.
And,
it
felt like Gordon was just a completely different character.
Yeah, it's just a stupid idea.
I felt like they kind of aged him down just so that he could like actually be Batman, even though he's in a mech suit most of the time. So I don't know why he had to be in tip-top shape in the first place, but okay.
Well, like every writer has to kill off Batman now and replace him with something because Morrison did it, so now everybody's got to do it.
Yeah, it's like, stop it. Yeah, the irony was the amnesia Bruce Wayne stuff was my favorite part of that, and I should have hated that. But like that stuff was all right.
Oh, interesting.
That villain was weird. I've never reviewed that either. Maybe at some point we'll do that, just to do it.
Oh no. Maybe you will turn me against Snyder.
I mean, I'd rather do that than the end of Tom King.
I'd rather do that than like any of Tom King.
Anyway, everybody, thanks a lot for watching. So that's what we're doing next time. And if you would like to make a request, you can go to patreon.com/geekvolution. The $15 tier makes that possible. And you can request a movie or the pilot for a TV show or a comic arc or short part of a run or a graphic novel, whatever you like. Doing a lot of comics right now.
Mm-hmm.
And cool. In the meantime, I was Captain Logan. This was Austin the Day Ghost. And Austin, thanks for reading the 400 pages, man. I'm glad it was good.
Yeah. And at least when we do the next one, it's not a 90s book, so it'll read really quick.
Yeah, that's true. There won't be as much internal monologue. Did you catch the place in this? I can't remember who it was right at the very end. Was it X-51? that was like, it's funny, we never made an X-23 joke. I meant to do that. But did you notice that at the very end, I think it was X-51 was like, I'm writing all this stuff down now. It's my internal monologue.
I don't think I caught that as a line.
Yeah,
that is from him. I think that
line is in there. This is my internal monologue. I'm like, yep, that's what it is.
Yeah, there's that part where he's like, I'm recording all of this down because it might be the last thing ever recorded of Earth.
It's my internal monologue.
It's my internal monologue.
That's great. Anyway, bye Daniverse, bye John Ty, bye everybody. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.